What's going on, everybody? Robert Horovitz here. I came down to the basement to just get away. The dogs were barking uncontrollably upstairs, so I thought here I'd come down to a quiet environment. I wanted to go through some wicked items, just amazing items that I have for you here. My favorite item is really bread. I mean, it's most of our favorite items, except with the gluten-free craze, they're ruining it for everybody. It seems like nowadays you can't walk anywhere without somebody telling you shouldn't eat bread, you shouldn't eat bread. And I think for the most part, the truth of it is a lot of us do have food sensitivities to wheat. If you look on one of my earlier YouTube videos, I actually describe this in detail. Why do people have food sensitivities? Why do people have gluten sensitivities? And why is gluten bad? Is it really gluten? Is gluten really the culprit? So I have that. I'm going to see if I can learn how to tag things. I haven't really yet. I don't really understand how to do it. So if anybody can tell me how to actually properly create a tag, please let me know. But I'll try and do that, or at least put the link down below. Maybe that'll be useful for you guys. But basically what I look for bread, and I think one of the reasons why we have the most difficulty with bread, and I didn't invent this. This is widely out there. There's a great documentary on YouTube. It's called Cooked by Michael Pollan, and he created a book called Cooked, actually, and then they turned it into a documentary. It's full of useful stuff. There's one episode on, and actually it's on Netflix. It's on Netflix, actually. You could watch it. It's on fermentation, I think, is when they talk about bread. Anyway, I can't remember. Either way, bread, it turns out that wheat is a superfood, but with mass production, the short of it is that we found quick ways of producing bread, which isn't really the way we've produced bread for, millennia. The real way to produce bread is not to add yeast to it, because you don't need to. If you ferment the bread and you let the bread leaven naturally, there's ambient yeast in the air. There's bacteria, and fungus in the air naturally. So the bread should be able to use what they call ambient yeast, which is just naturally occurring in the air to ferment the bread. But the catch is that it requires a lot of time. So if you ask most bakeries whether they produce old world style bread, I forget, there's some other terminologies for it. There's a great bakery in Guelph, for all you Guelph people, I forget what it's called now. They sell bread to the Stone store. I was just off the phone with those guys and they told me what it was. Anyway, I'm going to be visiting that bakery on Wednesday, so I will see you later. They have phenomenal bread. They call it something. It's not old world style, but it's something else. It's like naturally leavened bread or something, where it requires time and it leavens naturally. And what happens if you allow that process to happen naturally, the fermentation process, the bacteria have enough time to pre-digest a lot of the hard to digest compounds in the bread, making even gluten, although you can't really digest gluten, you don't really digest it the way you would other proteins. You don't really break it down in a sense. You could utilize it a lot more effectively by breaking down other products in the bread. And so basically, if you go to a bakery, ask them if they do old world style bread. Ask them if they add yeast. If they add yeast, this is mass production. You might have a hard time digesting it. But pretty much, if you try naturally leavened or old world style bread where they don't add yeast, they're just using ambient yeast in the air, chances are you won't really have a problem unless you eat copious amounts of it. But if you have a little bit of it, you won't get the bloating and gas you usually find. You'll digest through it just fine, most probably. This is one example of a bread company that I love. They're now at Costco, but you can find them at most good grocery stores should have it. It's called Stone Mill. Hopefully you guys can see it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put it down so you guys can actually get a better view. They're not the only bread company to do this, but they're one of a few. And they list right here fermentation. You could see that right there, ferment. Some of the bread says 4 hours, some of them says 12, and one I think is even 24 hours. But the most important thing really to notice is, and see if you can read that. You could probably look at the ingredient list there. Hold on, let me see if I could focus this for you. You guys should be able to see that. But there's no yeast in the ingredient list, okay? And the reason why there's no yeast, by the way, it's non-GMO project verified, which is also an amazing distinction. But, organic ingredients, just great natural ingredients. But the fact that there's no yeast, they can get away with that because it's fermented. It's fermented bread, so there's naturally ambient bacteria in there. And so that's why actually when I eat bread in general, it doesn't agree with me at all. As much as I love bread, pastas, and all that stuff, it doesn't agree with me at all. So I really have to watch my face. I gotta watch my face, but I also gotta watch myself. But when I have some of this bread, especially maybe in the morning, I'm fine. So anyway, that's the tip. I don't want to get too long-winded on this video, but that is a huge tip. Look for fermented, naturally old world style bread. Look for breads that do not contain yeast. And ask the questions. Do they ferment it naturally? You know, how are they making their bread? Ask your local bakery and ask them to produce it for you. If not, the amazing bread companies are in Elora, Ontario, and in Guelph, Ontario. Port Hope and Coburg. They use naturally sourced ingredients and they're organic, which, you know, good for them, but they're not using the old world style method. So I'm actually kind of disappointed. I would love it if they would use that type of bread. So anyway, that's all for now. Cheers.